Council President Sidney Katz recently gathered residents from across generations and asked them to share their experiences with law enforcement in Montgomery County. Participants also presented their ideas for ensuring appropriate, equitable relationships between law enforcement professionals and community members, particularly our Black and Brown residents. Mr. Katz listened and learned and committed to sharing the lessons with his colleagues and proceeding forward as president of the County Council and chair of the Public Safety Committee, guided by this new information.
Hey, I'm Sidney Katz. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Council. I'm the District 3 Montgomery County Council member, and I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee. And I'm very grateful that everyone has taken time out of your day to share with me your personal experiences with law enforcement. 2020 has been an intense year and has brought to the surface many issues our society never adequately addressed. The horrific murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer shocked us to the core. It was a despicable act of violence against an unarmed Black man. Montgomery County strives for a public safety system that serves and protects all citizens equally. But as we have all learned, systems have been built on histories of racism and oppression. Systemic racism is an ongoing and deeply ingrained problem throughout our society, and it has been downplayed for far too long. I'm here to listen, learn, and implement change. Today, I want to hear from you. I want to hear about your experiences interacting with law enforcement in Montgomery County, and most importantly, I want to hear your suggestions on how we can address the systemic racial issues we face. We've assembled a great group of people, a multi-generational group, to look at how things have changed, but also how far we need to go. I encourage you to be direct and honest in your thoughts, experiences, and suggestions. I want to publicly thank Tiffany Ward and Susan Kennedy. Tiffany is the Montgomery County Chief Equity Officer and will expertly moderate the discussion. Susan is a senior producer with County Cable Montgomery and will serve as our technical expert who will manage the recording so it can be shared with the larger community soon. I very much am looking forward to what you have to say. And I want you to know my staff wrote this. They wrote for me to say, this is the last you'll hear from me until we are finished. And I look forward to listening to your experiences and hearing your suggestions. I will try my best to do that. But as my third grade classmate, Greg Wims, who's on this call, knows, it's very tough for me to be quiet during the whole thing, but I'm going to try my best. I want to hear from you. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. I am Tiffany Ward. As Councilmember Katz said, I am the Director of the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice / the Chief Equity Officer here in Montgomery County. And I too want to thank our panelists for spending time with us today to talk about this important topic and particularly to discuss your experiences here in the county. Much like the council member, I think that everybody was shocked yet again, quite frankly, by the killing of George Floyd, really in front of the whole country. So it brought to light again the inequities in policing and in treatment for communities of color, and particularly for Black people. And so we have been having these discussions all over the county for the past few months, and I'm really happy that Councilmember Katz has decided to continue this discussion. Today, we are joined by a panel of residents and constituents who are going to share with us their experiences, give us some context and history, and hopefully some ideas of how we can improve policing in Montgomery County. I'm going to ask those panelists to introduce themselves, and I will just read off the names as I see them on the top of my screen. And just let us know what you want us to know about you. whether there's an official title or not, just something you would like the audience to know about you and your experience here in Montgomery County. All right, first across my screen is Greg Wims.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. Greg Wims, sixth generation Montgomery County and growing up in Upper Montgomery County. And the group that I am representing today is the Victims' Rights Foundation. So thank you and good to be here.
Thank you. Next across my screen is Justin Manda.
Hi, my name is Justin Manda. I come with the Brothers Academy. I'm a business analytics intern there. I graduated from GHS 2020.
Okay. And next across my screen is Anita Powell.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Neal Powell, and I am the president of the Lincoln Park Historical Foundation and the Leroy African American Research Center, the only one in the county. And I was just recently awarded the Roscoe R. Nix Community Leadership Award, which I'm very grateful for. And also, I am still living in the community that I was brought up in, and that's Lincoln Park and Rockville.
Thank you. And next I have Jinabu Traore. Please correct my pronunciation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Traore. I'm a senior at John F. Kennedy High School, and I'm 17 years old.
Okay. And now I have Nahom Tekel.
Hey everyone, my name is Nahom Tekle, and I'm the executive director at Brothers Academy. I grew up in Gaithersburg, graduated from Gaithersburg High School in 2013.
Thank you. I have Alibi.
My name is Just Love Alabi. I am a sophomore at Springbrook High School.
Thank you. Have I missed anybody on our panel?
I'm a senior at Gaithersburg High School and the president of the Brothers Academy, and I've lived in Gaithersburg, Montgomery County all of my life.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All righty. I'm going to jump right in with our first question. Our first question I really have for some of the more senior members of our community. And this one's really for Mr. Wims and Ms. Powell. As lifelong residents of Montgomery County, will you guys give us some context of how policing in Montgomery County has changed as far as you can see in your communities, particularly how it has changed for the African American community? I know that Ms. Powell, you are a Lincoln Park native, and Mr. Wims, you are a native of Up County. I'm just wondering how policing today looks different than it does or than it did 50, 60 years ago.
Well, I'll go first. It looks different because we now have more Black officers. We have officers who have come from our communities, officers who give back to our community. And I don't think before, let's say 50, 60, I can't go that far back, but we didn't necessarily have that access. I think they are more, today they're more community friendly. I think that, I can remember when in 1991, when we had the 100th anniversary of Lincoln Park, there was a killing during that time, and automatically they thought it was from our community, but it was not. I think the individuals who were killed, they were brought from one area and brought to the community, to the Lincoln Park community. And I think back then compared to now, we would have had that discussion before it, got out of hand, and it would not have been compared. They would, I believe, have researched and they would have taken care of whatever they needed to before they assumed it was a part of our community. So, in short, I just think that we have more community access today than we had yesterday.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. Mr. Wims.
Yes, first, I would agree with Anita and not repeat, except for to say that we're so fortunate to have a Black police chief today, Chief Marcus Jones, who came up through the ranks of the police department and is, in my opinion, today doing a great job during these times that we're having. I did want to go back to when I was a child. One of the things that we noticed, besides not having people of color on the force, was that whenever there was an incident in the Black community, and I grew up in Up County, transition from Clarksburg to what we call Stewarttown, which is a historic Black community, not as large as Lincoln Park, but right outside of Gaithersburg. When there was an incident, you would have maybe 10, 15 police cars that come. Whereas I noticed when we go to other neighborhoods that were majority white, you would have 2 or 3 cars if something happened. So I've seen a difference today where there's an incident, whether it's in my community of Stewarttown or whether it's in Lincoln Park or whatever, there's an incident, you don't see that many officers respond. You see the appropriate amount of officers. So that's something that I would reminisce.
Interesting. Okay, that is actually great to know. Great to know. This next question is for some of the young people on our panel. What is your first reaction when you see the county police officers? Do you feel safe? Do you feel unsafe? Do you feel uncertain? Are there any particular interactions that you or your friends have had that have influenced your opinions or your reactions to Montgomery County police officers?
Before I entered high school, when I usually saw police officers walking around my neighborhood, I would get scared because of the other neighborhoods next to me. They've had a lot of problems with kids getting arrested or just bad things happening in their neighborhood, and then from the news, and I was always scared. But once I entered high school and our police officer for our school looked like me, I ended up feeling a bit more comfortable and more safer in that way.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can I go?
Sure.
So I would like to say my first encounter with Montgomery County police officers was actually in middle school. And it was after I went to Silver Spring International Middle School, which is just up the street from me. And it was after one of our talent shows, and, a bunch of middle schoolers being loud outside. It's the middle of the night. And I think somebody threw some sort of bottle or something at a car, and the police were called, and it was about 5 police cars themselves that showed up. And they were all for one student, and the student was my friend, and he was just sitting on the curb. They were asking him a whole bunch of questions, and he was in handcuffs. And to think, this is a middle schooler, there's no adults around. All the teachers are telling us we all need to get back to the school building, and it's like this one middle schooler is sitting there by themselves. And it's, he was a child. He was simply a child, and, children do rowdy things. And even now, a lot of my friends from middle school have grown up, and they haven't exactly taken the best paths in my mind, but, that is what they wanted to do. So some of them have been arrested and gone to juvenile detention centers, but it seems like when they go into they come back out doing the same exact thing they were doing before. So it's like the detention center served no purpose. There was no restorative justice. There was no teaching or education. They went in, they served their time, they came right back out just to make the same mistakes. And on top of that, I kind of what Just Love said, my resource officer at school, I love Officer Palmer. She's amazing. I've never had any problems with her. I've never actually seen her have any problems with specific students, even the students that are known to be typically bad students. She always deals with them in an appropriate manner and encourages them to act the correct way in school, to go to class, and to focus on their education. But I feel like the way certain school resource officers act, and I can only speak for mine, she acts appropriately, but I don't think we get that same from the actual Montgomery County police officer.
Interesting. Anybody else who wants to chime in on that question?
My first experience with Montgomery County Police was my junior year in high school. It was a Friday night, and I was on my way home late from a function with a few of my friends. We were in Rockville, and the police had pulled us over. We weren't sure why, because we weren't doing anything wrong. And the police officer came up to the window, knocked, we put down the window, and the first thing he asked was, "Have you been drinking?" Now, my friend was in the driver's seat. He was white, and he looks at the officer like he's crazy, and he says, "No, we haven't been drinking." And the officer is like, "Okay, sure. Well, your headlights are off." And he sticks his hand through the window and turns on the headlights. And then he looks at me, because I'm in the passenger seat, and he looks at my 2 friends in the back, both Hispanic males, and says, "Get them home safe." Now, I thought back to that time a few weeks later, because during the moment, I didn't think much about it. But if that officer had really thought that we were drinking, he wouldn't have let us away. So I think there are many reasons why he let us go. I mean, possible reasons why he let us go, but I think some are more likely than others. And probably because he was white.
Interesting. Justin or Nahom, do you all want to weigh in on that particular question? I know, Nahom, you're not a young person, but you work with young people well, you are a young person, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You work with young people every day, so perhaps you have some insights for us.
Yeah. What I can add to it is I'd say, from my experience from this side, working with brothers, we work with police officers all the time, especially when we were doing those food drives during COVID. We were closely contact. I think having a relationship with the officers that we do, I think having a relationship with the people that are in your community, I think that makes a huge difference. People in our community have a relationship with the officers or Marcus Jones. So I think having a relationship makes a big difference. But I would say when I was in high school in their seat, similar story to Kevin, but I remember we were at a friend's house and it was we were technically, it's a yard without a fence, so it's technically in the neighbor's lawn. And they called the police for trespassing because I guess there was, 15 and 20 of us. And even though my friend literally lives next door, they rushed in. They had guns out. They slammed all of us. I remember to myself thinking, hey, I'm 15 years old. I don't know if anything, I'm just outside in my friend's backyard. So to have been slammed and have a gun in my face just because someone called for trespassing when it was clear that we were all high school students, I think that was my first encounter where it seemed very excessive in terms of the force that was used. But again, that was about 8 years ago. But I would say largely my experience with Montgomery County Police have been, in my adult life, very positive. But in my youth, I did encounter just an exaggerated experience based on the situation that occurred.
For me, so I graduated from Gatesburg High School, but I grew up in Bethesda. And I know that a lot of kids, not just me, but a lot of kids our age just walk around Bethesda Row a lot at night. And I'd always feel really uneasy doing that by myself. And I didn't want to walk home alone because I felt unsafe with the police and I didn't really know them at all. But as Nahom pointed out, in Montgomery County, like in the Gatesburg area, police do offer help. They go to our food drives, they talk to us, they talk to everybody else. So I have a strong connection with the police in Gaithersburg, and I know that I feel a lot safer with the police in Gaithersburg, and they do a lot of work. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this question is actually not on my list, but I'm going to ask it because it came across in almost everybody's response, and it really is about relationships with police. So do you find, and anybody can answer this, that the relationship with the police makes your interaction different? That if you know a police officer or don't know a police officer knows or doesn't know you, when I say know, I mean kind of in a generic sense, knows your neighborhood. Do you feel like that relationship makes your interaction feel more safe to you? Do you feel like that police officer or the police force values you or your community more? What value basically do you see in having a relationship with the police in general and with specific police officers?
I can jump in really quick.
Yeah.
I guess the short answer I have for that is the difference between feeling like the interaction with the police officer is they're out to get me, right? They're looking for any possible thing to give me a ticket or to book me in or just cause some legal issue, versus, hey, this person is looking to enforce the law and inquire justice and feeling like there's going to be a fair interaction. Having, kind of seen both sides, I think the relationship just makes you feel like, hey, this is a conversation between two individuals, one with the authority to enforce the law, and you can kind of feel like this is something that there's a foundation of right and wrong, versus before it would be more so, hey, this police officer is looking for anything possible to kind of incriminate me or look for a reason to, make me a statistic. So therefore, I feel like there isn't that trust. So I say trust is where the relationship makes a difference. And the police officer could be good in both scenarios, but when you have that relationship, you assume that they're there to do their job with justice and righteously versus, hey, I might just be targeted and they're looking for anything to put on my name.
I could relate to what Nahom said because as I was growing up, we always had police officers in our neighborhood. They always knocked on our doors asking about what the neighbors did or what this and that. And all my parents have always told me, they want to find out something, That's what I've always known. And even at school, they want to find out something. They want to do something to make you look bad. So I feel like even though I have police officers in my neighborhood that look like me and they talk to us, we sit down, we play basketball, even if they're somebody or a police officer that looks like me, I still don't feel that feeling of trust with them because of past experiences I've seen with me and other kids.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else want to speak to that question? And then I have a follow-up question.
So really quickly, I just wanted to say, I feel like it's less about relationships and like trust versus more mutual understanding. We as a community of color have to understand that there are police officers who are doing their job, who are there to simply enforce the law. But then these police officers also have to understand that not everyone is going to fit into the stereotype that they may or may not be looking for, and that they should go into every situation with an objective standpoint, whether they see a white person, Hispanic person, a black person in that driver's seat or in the passenger seat or anywhere in the vehicle or anywhere near the situation. They should go in and, go through strategic steps just to ask about the situation in and of itself and the nature that maybe may have arrived versus about the person. Because at the end of the day, it's about what they did against the law, not who they are or where they come from.
Right. Okay.
So I'd say that building a relationship with people is actually quite important because my brother, he struggles with schizophrenia. So I actually have police over at my house like weekly, very frequently, all the time. And it's usually the same officers who come to and respond. And it's they have a connection with me and my mother. So when my brother does end up getting in trouble with just people outside, they always they do their best to not hurt him or anything. They're really respectful. They always take him to the hospital to make sure he gets the help that he deserves. And even though it may be repetitive, they still do it. They come by and they do their best, and they're really respectful the whole time. So, and it's not usually people of my color either. So.
Well, I come from the relationship from a different perspective because I have made myself available to learn about the police themselves and what they are responsible for and how they're supposed to react to the community. So I belong to several, like the African American Advisory Committee for Montgomery County Police, and I've taken training with the City of Rockville Police. So I try to surround myself around what I am expected to receive from the police. For example, when I was stopped by the police many years ago, and I think I just started practicing this. So if you're stopped by the police, I always try to break that communication and, they come up to me, I say, well, how are you today? How's your day going? Because you don't know what kind of day I've had. I don't know what kind of day you've had. So we just need to get it over with. We need to figure out where we are. And then I will ask, so why are you stopping me? And then that sort of, break the tension between the two of us. So I find that's very helpful, especially for the young people.
Okay. And I guess this is for everybody. Have you noticed that your interactions with police are different from your counterparts who are not of the same race? And if they are, have you attributed those, or do you attribute those different treatments to race? And then how do you, how do you reconcile that? How do you make sense of that, particularly in Montgomery County? Like if you live in a neighborhood or in a community that is mostly Black or brown, do you believe that your interactions with police are different from your interactions with communities that are mostly white? And then how do you make sense of that? Or do you know that there's different treatment? Like, are you in touch with constituents, friends, or associates who can tell you, oh, well, I got stopped by the police and that didn't happen to me, or I you know, they came to my house, and that's not how it happened for us.
It's an interesting question. I find that today the police are not as aggressive as they were yesterday. It seems to have like a different attitude. We used to have this police officer, whenever he came to the community for whatever reason, we knew somebody was going to go to jail. Didn't matter what they did, we knew they were going to go to jail because that's the reputation he had built. So I think that going forward and looking from yesterday to today, I just think the attitudes are a little bit more different. It could be because of their training. I don't know, but I think it's a little bit different.
Okay, that's good to know. Anybody else? Any of our young folks? Do you find that when you're with certain friends, the treatment is different? When you're with other friends, it's one way, and the other friends, it's another?
Like, majority of my friends don't really like the police, regardless of their own race.
Okay.
And I feel, but like the way that we all interact with police is different. Just that in the Black community, we have the talk. You know, our parents will tell us how to interact with police. It's always yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. But I don't always see that with my friends who aren't Black. And I think it's because they don't have that talk with their parents. So they're a little more reckless, I want to say, when talking with the police. And they're a little more vocal about their dislike of them.
Interesting. Anyone else?
I just wanted to note that, not unfortunately, but I've never actually seen a police encounter with someone that wasn't a person of color. So I don't know if it's just solely based on the school I go to, because the majority of my schools have been minority majority schools, and I also live in a minority majority neighborhood. So I don't know if it's just based on the neighborhood that I've been in, and I'm not necessarily in the more white dominant areas, but I've never seen a white person get arrested in Montgomery County.
Wow, thank you for that. So earlier, Mr. Wims and Ms. Powell noted that they thought that some of the ways that we interact, or the police interacted with their neighborhoods, had improved. Wondering if there are any things that have stayed the same, any things that you think could be improved, and things that you were surprised are not better than they were 50, 60 years ago.
Well, I think I'll start. I like hearing from the young people, but I'm just laughing to myself because I'm just trying to think. I haven't seen that many white people get arrested myself. I see it on TV. Now, of course, I'm older, so I've seen some things, but I'm just reflecting. I think pretty much, you know, as I grew up and even in adulthood, I would see police come into the neighborhood, because I now live in a neighborhood that's integrated. And there's a difference when an officer comes to my neighbor who's white and so forth, and then a neighbor who's Black. So I wanted to say that first. Now, to answer your question, again, there has been tremendous improvement, and a lot of it's training. Ms. Powell mentioned it, and I think the brothers mentioned Marcus Jones. You can't put everything on one person, but I think he put his foot down, especially when, unfortunately, George Floyd lost his life. He made a point to stand with the marchers, the protesters, which was, as we all know, of all backgrounds and all races, to say Montgomery County Police would not stand for anything like this. So I think today in Montgomery County, things are much better, but I'm sure that there are problems that I just haven't seen myself. But I wanted to go back to say I'm going to be thinking now, when I see officers stop white folks, will they arrest them or what it is, from what you just said. So anyway, that's that comment.
I have a tendency when I see the police pull over, I don't know if they're young or whatever, but I notice that the Black person that's pulled over, they have to sit on the curb. Compared to the white person, they can stand up. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know what's going on, but I do know there's a difference when a Black person is arrested compared to a white person.
And do you feel like there are things that have stayed the same since you, were young in Montgomery County, growing up in Montgomery County, or things that have actually become worse? I know the first question we asked, you said that you thought that some things had changed. I was just wondering if there are things that hadn't. Are there things that are just, are we stagnant in some places with our police force?
I would say what has changed is that the community is invited to participate in policing, community policing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was offered before.
Okay.
And I think the police are trying to have a conversation, and before they were not. They were just about doing their job. And so when you say stay the same, I mean, the outcome may still be the same, but it's with a different attitude now. And I think that there should be more communications between races, between ages, so we can understand what it is that we're supposed to do. We know that growing up, you put your hands on your dashboard, you never get smart because you will never ever win. You can win in the courtroom, but you won't win on the street. The police always win. Mm-hmm. Okay? So I think that it's the attitude that will get us through whatever it is that we are being put through at that moment. So, and I think that's a little bit different, but in terms of being Black, we are more cautious. Mm-hmm. And I think we're still very cautious when we're stopped by the police, because you don't know if you really have a light out or not. I mean, that happened to me. I had a light out, and then when I decided to get out to check my light wasn't really out. I just happened to be in an area that drug activity was taking place, and I was just washing my clothes. Mm-hmm. And so it turned out that, and I knew the police officer, and I said, well, wait a minute, my light's out, and I really thank you for, looking out for me, so let me get out to check to make sure my light is out so I know which one and what I need to do. Oh, no, you don't need to do that. Oh, yes, I do. So I get out in the rain, and I check my light's not out.
Wow.
So you have to be honest when you approach citizens. Because you never know if they're going to fact check you to make sure that what you say is wrong with your car is really wrong with your car. So, I mean, that was back in the day. So, today, I mean, it still happened. That was not really that long ago. So I think what has changed is that we are being more engaged into the process than we were on yesterday.
Okay. All right. This is a follow-up question for one of the comments that one of our students made earlier about how he felt like, despite the race of any of his friends, that they weren't particularly comfortable with the police. So this is really a question about how you think young people can feel more safe with police. What changes can a police force make to gather that trust or comfort with young people around policing and police individually?
There's a really big disconnect between my generation and the police, just as there's all this things that's going on in the media, and my generation has taken it upon themselves to attack us. There's a lot of protests going on. We saw earlier during quarantine, all the protests that were happening. And to answer your question, I honestly don't know. There's just too big of a disconnect. Nowadays, everyone is against the police. There's the idea that all cops are bad. And then you have Blue Lives Matter, which is a protest in direct opposition to Black Lives Matter. So I think that just adds on to the disconnect. So I honestly don't know.
No, don't be sorry. That's a really good answer. Do any of our other young people have ideas of how we can bridge that gap, or how the police really can come more towards you in creating a sense of safety, of comfort, or trust?
Interacting more with the community and getting to know us more instead of us always running back inside our apartments when we see them outside because we don't want anything to do with them.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you for
and
that.
I want to add too. I think for especially under 18, right? I think even on a more policy level, figuring out a way for young people to not have their whole future ruined by a mistake that is, at that age, your decisions are really circumstantial to the environment and how, and how you're, exposed to things. So with that being account, I think having a high level of sensitivity to how young people are going to be treated for their mistakes and having something in place that allows them to, of course, we want to keep the public safe and we want to enforce the law. But at the same time, I think someone else mentioned how they have friends that, go to these detention centers and they come out and there really isn't a change. So is how do we create that sense of community from the perspective of how do police officers provide a sense of, I'm here to help and I'm on your side, right? Like, yes, there has to be a consequence for your actions, but I'm not here to punish you, sentence you, put you in jail, and move on to the next criminal. It's adding an element of caring for the individual, even when they're guilty, right? And I'm not saying that broadly, I'm specifically emphasizing for the youth and looking them through the lens of not really being fully counted out for their actions at such a young age, and the police officers, through some policy, through some training, approaching situations where there's a minor that's being arrested, approaching it from the sense where it doesn't result in this cycle of them either going back to that habit, going to detention centers and having that record. Just I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I think for young people, if they feel like, hey, police officers aren't here to ruin my life, they're here to help me, they're here to guide me, they're here to check me when I'm going in the wrong direction. I think if they start having that trust built from they're here to lift me up and not bring me down, again, we have to uphold the law, we have to enforce it. But finding, again, I think it's a convoluted thing, but just finding a room where there's a bit of grace for youth and more developmental, more rehabilitative efforts than sentence, book, and move on.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Is there anybody else?
Yes, I wanted to add on. I'm not sure how effective it might be, but also the discussion of transparency.
Yes.
So I'm not necessarily sure how transparent, the Montgomery County Police are right now, but just doing simple things like showing us the curriculum of their training, what do they spend the most money and time on during training, the types of different trainings that they go through, do they have monthly or weekly forums on how to deal with this type of community or this type of situation. So like I said, I'm not necessarily sure how effective it might be, but having access to certain information to feel like, so that we don't feel like they're hiding something from us or they're being secretive, they're all out to get us. It's like, well, they can't all be out to get us if we have all this information here, which means somebody in that police force is trying to do their job adequately, and it's not all about hurting the minorities.
Yep. Thank you for that. You actually ran into my next question. How can the police department be more transparent and be held accountable to the community? So if anybody wants to follow up on what Genevieve just answered, or her statement, that would be great.
I guess here again, the only thing I was chime in is transparency when it comes to information and data on the officers that is as accessible as it is for them to access our information. Right? You get pulled over, they look up your information, they know your history, and they probably make judgments, right? How harsh or how forgiving they will be based off of your history and record. So similarly, I think for police officers, sometimes it's not fair, right? They get the short end of the stick where, they're trying to just do their job and the person is in an emotional state or they're getting very self-defensive. And it's really hard for the officers to do their job. So I want to be objective here. And I think to kind of find the middle ground where the officer can do their job, but at the same time for the minority community to feel like they're safe and not experiencing injustice. Just having access to the information to be able to dictate, hey, this person has no record of wrongdoing. So for me to sit here and, and to look at the situation from that lens probably is less likely, not impossible, but less likely, right? So I think just to normalize the encounter, no one likes to be arrested, no one likes to be in trouble. But to normalize situation, hey, like the accountability of the community to be able to, you know, own up to mistakes, but at the same time, having that information available so that, you know, there's transparency on both sides in terms of the demeanor, the character, and the reputation of both parties.
The police need to give us a reason to trust them, because anytime I'm getting pulled over or someone colleague gets pulled over, they don't know who's pulling them over. They don't know what type of police officer that is. And although it may be a small chance that that person is looking to take their life, a small amount of doubt can go a long way when it's in terms of life and death. So I think there's always going to be that fear as long as we're hearing about all these bad things that are going on.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think we're going to go into our last question. And it really is, what would you change? What would you change? You can be as specific about, I guess, the policing in Montgomery County, particularly policing in your communities. And the changes can be as specific or as kind of philosophical as you would like. But what would you change? What do you think would give your community a huge amount of improvement around policing and police interaction? And I'd like everybody to weigh in on this one if you can.
Before I would, the question is, what would we change?
Yeah, what would you change to improve the interactions or improve, the policing in your community?
Okay, but I wanted to go back with time running out to what the young people, I've been purposely quiet, and Councilman Katz knows that because I talk a lot, because I wanted to hear what they were saying. And one said earlier about the talk. And I do want to say that it is very good that your parents gave you the talk. My parents gave me the talk, and I have two now men, they were boys, had to give them the talk. I think that's very important. So what would change is very simply is that I think it comes from both my community, the Black community, and the police community, which is of course multi-racial now, is that we would understand how they operate at work. And one of the things that's helped my community, because I was a leader, like you young people are leaders. I also, at Montgomery College, became a leader. And I found out that it's the sergeants that actually control everything on the street. And so what I made a point to do with my community folks, they weren't leaders, but just in my church, because it just so happens where I live is where the church is, that we had the sergeants come in, and they always come in, because whenever there's a problem, you really, if you got that number, and I get the number, and I would advise my young people to get the number of the sergeant from your district, that you could always dial with your cell phone. So I'm having a problem with officer text, because that also protects you if things get out of hand. So to answer your question, change, I would have the community, you wouldn't say demand, but ask the chief or whoever to put you in touch with the sergeants in all the communities you live in. That probably would save lives in the long run.
Okay. All right, Jennifer, you are up next across my screen. What would you change? Both specifically and philosophically, what would you like to see change?
I don't want to be that person that brings this in, but it just really goes back to the defund the police debate. And there's a lot of controversy around it, but from the way that I see it, it's not defund the police system as a whole, but maybe reallocate some of their money to other situations. Like Justin had mentioned, he has a brother who has mental health disabilities. So that's not really an area where all police officers have specialties. And, you know, their job is to enforce the law. So what does enforcing the law really have to do with helping someone with mental disabilities? So it's more reallocating the funds or giving them the proper training to be able to deal with all these situations. Because, you know, in school we have SROs, but sometimes they do have to call in actual police officers because of situations. So how are these police officers coming in to deal with high school students and middle school students who are still children, who are young, who are adolescents that make decisions off whims? You know, they shouldn't go in being aggressive in a certain way or with a certain type of mindset with, okay, we have to enforce the law, because every situation should be assessed differently. So, you know, it's not fully defund the police, but definitely reallocate the funds or give them the proper training so that they're doing their job effectively all across the board if they're going to be in those situations.
Thank you. Kevin, do you have a few words for us around improvements?
I think, well, I agree 100% with Genevieve. Just defining the police and reallocating those, like, that funding to places where it's needed, like education, mental health is very important. But also just changing the way that police are trained is very important. I think not only increasing the time, but adding on to what is learned during their time in the academy needs to change. And just keeping up with that. Like, don't let the training and the learning stop once they leave the academy. Just follow up, having like consistent training and like seminars on like when to use force, when to use your gun, what chokeholds or like ways of force are necessary in which type of situations and just stuff like that.
Thank you. Nahom, you're up next.
Hey, I think I'll just build on what the group has been saying. I think in the training, but more specifically, from my experience, in the corporate world, is they had a difference between people managers and managers, right? They both perform at the same level, but the people managers are the ones that had the aptitude to kind of where they trusted to have an associate under them and manage people. So I want to say that with all these departments, you become what you promote, and just really having an accountability system with outside of the department that really has the metrics, the things that we're looking for, that we would want to promote. And these things are outside of how you perform, but again, what defines people managers isn't their performance, but who they are, how they're able to inspire, and the positive influence that they have. So I think within the police department is cultivating that culture through an accountability system and the way that they promote and acknowledge and build up their leaders in that. And just having that accountability model that speaks out loud, like it calls out the statistics that don't make sense and that are disproportionate. An accountability model that shows that the ones that are climbing that ladder are the ones that not just know how to perform their job well, but have a heart for transforming communities, have a mind for not just enforcing the law, but making the world a better place. I know there's plenty of that in the police force, and I think that is there. It's just an accountability model that promotes it, that enforces it, and that encourages it, and makes it something that we believe we can expect every time we encounter a police officer. Doesn't matter who they are, because we know that what the culture of that organization is something that will only bring people that we feel safe around.
Great. So thank you. Anita, you are up next.
So first, I think we should be treated with respect and have honest conversations like we're having right now. I also believe that when a 911 call goes out, that perhaps we should have some type of health professional to join in, because if you don't understand our community or our culture, you would treat us different. And that simply means is that I believe we should be able to include in the process, 911, there's someone standing on top of a car and they whatever. I don't know if in the police training, whether or not they are also getting mental health training as well, and if they are called on a scene that they can address it. So I think that we need to include health professionals into the process going forward.
I agree with that, with everybody else is saying, honestly. And I also say that police should try interacting with the community, because I think that goes a long way. Because personally, I haven't seen police host their own like coat drive or food drive during COVID or anything. I've seen them support other food drives and such by being there. And I think I'd rather see them not always having to enforce, but really try to connect with people on a different level. Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Just Love, you are last, but definitely not least.
For issues like small fights or little conflicts we have in our community, you shouldn't come up to two students having an argument with a gun, to let that fear come out of us so that we could engage, be like that adult to come and talk to us to resolve the problem right now. Yeah, I would like to change that for them to have more of a connection with us in our neighborhood. Instead of us always getting scared and coming back inside to run to our moms and dads, but to say, hey, what's up? Hey, I haven't seen you in a while, you know?
Yeah. Thank you all. That was our last question, but I'm going to ask if you all have any other thoughts that you want to leave us with. And if not, I'm going to close us out. This has been great.
Well, I did want to say one thing to Justin, because I just got a call yesterday from the commander. There's going to be a coat drive, 100 coats in the community, primarily the Black community at Christmas. But since you brought this up, I'm going to talk about this communication and see if maybe we can get some funding to try to do the coat drive throughout the county. Because I think this particular coat drive is going to be up county, but we'll try to see if we can do something east Silver Spring. But that, just want to let you know that will happen at least for those 100 coats up county for Christmas. So I just want to put that in.
Council President Katz, did you want to close us out?
First off, thank you very, very much, each and every one of you. I started out by saying that I've been a lifelong friend of Greg's and Anita too, for that matter. And I've known Greg a little longer, but certainly have known Anita for many, many years. But I would hope you'd be my lifelong friends as well. I would hope that if you have a concern, positive or negative, that you would contact me in my office and so we can discuss it. Montgomery County has tried its best, and that doesn't mean we're perfect, because we're far from perfect, but we have tried our best to do a better job. Body-worn cameras. Body-worn cameras are not inexpensive, but the Montgomery County Police wear them, and the Sheriff's Department wears them, so that there is that accountability without question about what happened. And I did want to ask a question. This call, is there anybody that would want to become a police officer?
I used to want to become a police officer until, just media, it shut down my dream. And then afterwards, I started thinking about going into the Army. I'm still thinking about it now, but yeah.
You're still thinking about going in the Army, or still thinking about becoming a police officer?
My police officer dream is over, but the Army, I'm still thinking about it.
Well, dreams can change. You can, anybody else would consider it? No. Well, that's something that, we all should think about, because if you want good people, continue to have good people in a profession, and we have some, as was pointed out many times today, we have many, many good people in the profession. But if you want good people to be in the profession, you're a good person. You should consider doing it. So I ask you for that. I grew up in Montgomery County as well. I'm very proud of that fact. I went to Gaithersburg High School and very proud of that fact as well. But we all need to make certain that our community remains the strong place that it needs to be. Justice needs to be just. And I'd like to, if possible, continue this dialogue another day. I'd like to have perhaps a police officer on the call with us, so that if you had a question directly, I was on a Zoom call earlier with Chief Jones, and was pointed out several times today. He's a fine man. I've known he and his family for years. His daughters, I saw them play basketball a few times at Gaithersburg High School. So I mean, it is something that, and I think it was pointed out before as well, that when you know someone, when they've lived the life that you're living, you live the life that they're living, then it does seem to help with the communication. So that's what we need to do. We need to make certain that each other is comfortable with each other. So again, thank you very, very much. Please do not hesitate to call on my office for any reason. I can tell you, Greg's, and Anita to some degree, but Greg to a great degree, certainly does not hesitate to reach out to my office whenever there's a concern. And that's a big help to me. So thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to reiterate that thank you. I appreciate your time. I want to thank Council President Katz for asking me to moderate this conversation. And I am, I guess, partial to young people. I work with young people while I do my council work. So I'm really very happy to see you all so engaged and so thoughtful about this particular topic. And I just say, just stay engaged and stay thoughtful about this, and don't be hesitant to make your needs and your ideas known. People are literally on their seats waiting, on the edge of their seats waiting for them. And of course, thank you to Greg Wims and to Anita Powell, who have stayed in the fight for a long, long time. So yeah, that is the end for us.
Can I just interrupt 1 second? Could
Sure.
everybody please take themselves off of mute and applaud not only yourselves, but applaud Tiffany Ward for doing such an extremely good job today. She made it look so easy, didn't she?
Y'all are kind. Thank you. Y'all are really great. All right, have a wonderful afternoon. I hope this is, like the council president said, this is one of many conversations, and that we continue to talk about this issue and others.
Thank you. Thank you very much.